dear Rental Scale Up members. Thanks for joining once again this video for the conference about local property managers fighting this global epidemic. I'm joined now today by Andrew Macdonald. Andrew is a property manager in Bali. Bali is a very interesting market. If you've never been to Bali, you may not know that's a huge villa market, obviously. So it's very interesting to understand from him not only what the market is like usually, what the market is like right now, that there is demand, but you'll see it's very interesting kind of demand. Also very interesting to you property managers around the world, listening to what he has done to adapt his business to the current crisis. We'll be talking about reducing costs. We'll be talking about adapting services. That's very interesting as well, what he's been doing. We'll also be talking about how dealing with relationship with homeowners, because we all have to deal with the homeowners and to talk with them. That's also a very good point. So Andrew, thanks for joining.
Hi Thibaut, thank you.
Complete disclaimer first. So we know each other through a good friend of mine, Baron, because he was a villa manager of one of my villas in Bali, and now he's an employee of yours.
Yes, my star employee.
Star employee. So obviously I love Bali, and thanks to Baron I've been able to start talking with you, and you've been very telling me very interesting things about how you've been adapting your business to it. So maybe can you first present your company?
So my company is Zenguest Property Management. We started about 2 years ago. We have 22 villas under management now. And we had until recently 24 staff, and then I'll go into a little bit more detail later about that's part of the expense cutting, is that of course our staff has gone down. Yeah, that's the company.
So you basically have you say 22 villas with you, and yeah. And I said that Bali is a huge market for villas. So can you maybe help the people watching understand what the market is like in Bali, and in terms of like supply and demand usually?
Yeah, Bali actually has I think about 12,000 villas. It has a massive number of villas. In terms of the market, arrivals in Bali are 20% Australian, 20% Chinese, and then a bit of everyone else from all over the world. Everyone who comes to Bali is coming here to holiday. So there's very little business travel. There's very little domestic market. It's basically international holiday makers and weddings. So it's a little bit different to other markets in that when the international borders close down, we are really, really impacted. And in terms of the recovery, I think it's going to be much slower because we're not going to get the domestic recovery because there isn't a domestic market. So we're going to have to wait for all of those international borders to start opening up.
So that's interesting. Obviously, right, exposure to international markets. And as you said as well, the two biggest inbound markets are Australia and China. I think Australians have been renting villas for a long time. And you say, I think we talked a bit earlier, but you say also the Chinese also used to come on package tours. Now they're also renting villas as well.
So the Chinese is a growing market for villas. 2 years ago, we would not have a single Chinese tourist staying in a villa. But over the last year, we've seen a big rise in numbers, and a lot of those visits are conducted purely through Google Translate, the whole thing. There's no common language, but actually they work really well. It really works well.
That's very interesting. It's also a good tip for anyone working with international travelers, Google Translate. So let's talk about now what the current situation is, because we talk about this, and what's interesting as well, Bali obviously was hit earlier than other markets. I'm thinking about Europe and the US. And of course, flights from China, for example, stopped, I think, end of January, if I'm not mistaken. So what happened, and and there's still demand on the ground. So that's also very interesting. So what happened, and what's the demand like right now?
So the demand really started slowing down it was actually towards the end of February. I mean, at the end of February, we still held hope that things might rebound. Nobody really knew what was happening. But by about March 5th, March 6th, we started seeing all the cancellations starting to come through. At that time, we managed to replace nearly all of them, but at a much lower rate. So we still had very good occupancy in March. But at that point, I started letting the owners know that we had a big problem and getting them to understand that we were going to really have to look at price points we would never have ever imagined before. So I started getting that message across at that point. And then by the end of March, we didn't have any normal holiday making tourists at all. So all of those reservations had been cancelled. So what we found though was that there was another market, and that market was people who wanted to stick this thing out in Bali and not return home to their home country. Mainly Australians, also Europeans and Americans. And it's actually quite a large market. I have no way of knowing how big it is, but I do know that we get at least still 5 or 6 inquiries every day. We organise at least 2 or 3 visits of villas every day. And 80% of our villas are occupied now. The only thing is they're occupied at rates about 20% of the normal market rate. So they're basically just covering costs. The other interesting thing we're finding with the market now is the Russian market. So this only started about 2 weeks ago. We suddenly started getting a lot of inquiries from Russians. And now probably 70% of the inquiries are Russians. I don't know whether it's a combination of the difficulty of getting back and also just the unwillingness to go back. The difficulty in getting back is the fact that there are no scheduled flights back to Russia. There's no way to get back. You have to get on an evacuation flight. So you have to register with the government and you have to be ready to leave with a few hours' notice. So that means that it's very difficult to make a monthly booking. So we recently had an experience, actually she's checking in today, with a Russian who booked with us for a month, paid up front, and then started realising that this thing was going to go on for months and months. She had a mortgage back home, she had family, she started to worry, she started to think about getting back on one of those evacuation flights. So she asked us, is there any way we could give her back any unused days if she got an evacuation flight? So I talked to the owner, and of course we want to be as flexible as possible because this is not going to be the only case we have like this. So what we offered her was that she could stay in the villa. We would give her a refund if she got an evacuation flight of any remaining days. However, we would keep looking for a guest now. And if we found a guest who was willing to move in now, we would give her 3 days notice and then she could find other accommodation in that time and we could bring in another guest who was less, who we could rely on more for that monthly rental. And she was really, really happy with that solution. The owner was happy with it. And so it's something we're probably going to offer to more of the Russian market, is that we just work with each guest and give them a flexible solution.
So your company Zenguest has been able to sort of respond to that new demand from even new customers. I don't think you had very strong links with the Russian markets before, for example.
No.
It's very interesting. But also maybe to help people understand the situation in Bali, what's the lockdown like there in Bali? I think some maybe cafes and restaurants, some are open. How's the situation like?
So the lockdown is, it's a partial lockdown. So you're supposed to stay at home, but it's not a legal requirement. When you're out in public, you're supposed to wear masks. Again, it's not actually clear whether it's a legal requirement or not. As a lot of the laws in Indonesia are quite grey. They're quite difficult to actually interpret. So there are still people around on the street, but they're quite empty. I mean, for example, this is the first time I've ever had to respond to a guest request to hire bicycles, because you would never think of riding a bicycle in normal times in Bali, never. But now the roads are so clear that I've actually had 3 different guests requesting how can they hire a bicycle, so I've had to source a few suppliers. So people are taking it seriously. The beaches are closed. Probably 9 out of every 10 restaurants and cafes is closed, but they're opening up slowly. Most of the hotels are closed, even the 5-star hotels. And if they're not, they're at under 5% occupancy.
So it's pretty, yeah, the situation where, so basically you can be in a villa, so you can go to the supermarket and find food, or even go to a cafe and find something, but it's not the usual Bali, of course. And also something striking you told me, if anyone has ever been to Bali, is that Bali, of course, region is very important to Balinese, to Hindu Balinese, and there's no more ceremonies, right? The big thing for Bali is like it's almost non-existent anymore, right?
Almost non-existent. So they're very limited now, the ceremonies. So I think the weddings, funerals, most ceremonies are being deferred. So it's only, there's a couple of critical things in terms of marking people's stage in life. Like there's a tooth cutting ceremony. I think those ones still go ahead, but they're kept very small.
Yeah. So it's obviously big change in Bali. So that's
the
demand side, right? I hear several property managers saying they're switching to longer stays, right? Longer term stays, and we have people staying more weeks or months, right? And obviously, being able to stream this guest is going to be even more things, because I think you're also being adapted. So you have lower rates. So that's also what you're seeing as well. It's longer term stays, maybe, I guess, right?
Yes, yeah. So the stays are at least a month. We've got people staying at least a month, up to 3 months at the moment. And we have people requesting for up to a year. So there's some, because the rates are so cheap. I mean, I think the interesting thing is, though, that these villas are not built for long stays. You know, the average length of a stay in a Bali villa is 3.5 to 4 days. So, and generally people don't cook. So the kitchens aren't, you know, really well equipped, because, you know, it's Bali. You can go out and get a great meal anywhere. So the villas are not really equipped for long-term stays. So we've had a lot of requests which we've never had before. For instance, guests have asked for a bigger refrigerator. They've asked for yoga mats. They've asked for barbecues, more cooking implements, a washing machine. So all of these things to make their life, so they can actually live in the villa rather than just be staying there on a holiday. We haven't been able to supply those amenities because we're on such a tight budget that we can't. But in the end, they will generally go out and get those things themselves.
So I think that's interesting when we're talking about, like, because it's would be switching now to talking about how you adapted your business to this. And one of the first thing, of course, has to be changing the service levels, because something we could explain is, let's start by explaining there's a very high service level for vacation rentals in Bali compared with other places.
Yeah.
And obviously, this service is delivered by your staff, and the service level and the way staff interacts, all this you had to adapt to face the crisis. So can you share more on this?
Yeah, so that's, I mean, largely I see this as around health and safety. We do have a different model here to what you would normally see, in that there's a basic guest expectation, no matter how low the price of the villa they're staying, that they will get daily cleaning, and that they will, in most villas, they will have someone around most of the day that they can ask for anything they need. So there's a lot of contact with the guests, and that is a big safety issue for us. So what we've had to do with the monthly stays, we only offer cleaning 3 times a week, and the guests are absolutely fine with that. In fact, some of the guests say we don't want cleaning at all. Just when we need it, we'll ask for it, but otherwise you don't need to come in. So there's that, which reduces the risk somewhat, but we've also implemented some other measures there. So we have a daily briefing every morning. All the staff come in and we talk about where they're going to be working. The staff aren't assigned to individual villas. They go from villa to villa cleaning. So we take temperatures with a temperature gun. At that point, we also check for symptoms. When the staff go into the villas, they're wearing gloves, disposable gloves and masks. And they follow basically a set of disinfectant procedures that we put in place for COVID-19. Also, my business partner is a medical doctor, and so he gives regular briefings to the staff because he basically explains why you need gloves, why you need a mask, why you need to wipe off touch surfaces, etc. Because I think until you understand why you're taking preventative measures, it's very hard to stay compliant. If you don't understand why, it's easy just to say, well, I don't really need the mask or I don't really need the gloves. But I think our team has a big advantage in that sense. I think they're the best educated cleaning team in Bali.
So it's a big advantage. So you talked about protecting your staff, explaining why they should care, which is also very. I really like this, right? It's not just about do this, but this is why and why it's important to you, and also adapting service level, not only because there's a cost, obviously, and also there's actually sometimes, as you said, it's actually sometimes coming from the guest, right? It's like I don't necessarily want people to come in, so it does change. It does change expectations in Bali, what it's like to be in a villa, especially long term, I guess, monthly stays.
Yes.
We talked about, for example, for monthly stays, lower level of service or adapted level of service actually is a way to reduce costs. What other measures have you done for your own business to cut costs?
So, as you know, I mean, I suppose like a lot of property management companies, we are going to be operating at a loss for potentially, I think a lot longer than, say, the US or Europe because of the lack of domestic travellers. So we had to put together a plan where we cut expenses so that we could survive for 15 months. That's what we based it around. So the first step we had to take, because the biggest source of our cost was staff. We had initially planned to just cut staff hours and staff salaries to 50%. But when we realised how long this thing was going to last, we changed our thinking, because that's really a measure you take when you can see a recovery in a month or two and you need the staff there to deal with it. That's not going to happen. So we decided to cut 50% of our staff. It was a very, very difficult day. And we're left with a very dedicated and committed and motivated core group now. And I think there's actually a lot of optimism within the group about where we're going to, what the position we're going to be in when the market recovers. So that was one area we looked at, and that had a huge impact on our expenses. The other thing was, because this has been declared a force majeure situation by the Indonesian government, the termination payments were much less than they'd normally be. Because normally it's very, very expensive to terminate an employee in Indonesia. The labour laws are extremely strong, and you do not want to get in trouble with the labour department.
That's a very interesting point, right? Because some people believe that because it's Southeast Asia or Indonesia that there's no law. There are laws, right? Yeah, exactly. So it's not like it's never easy to fire anyone. It's always actually very painful, but it's
very painful.
Legal constraints in everywhere.
There's probably more so here, because it's easier for people's rights to be undercut. So I found the same thing. I worked in Thailand as well. Thailand also extremely strong labour laws and an extremely strong labour department who can destroy your business very easily. So yeah, that's certainly something we spent a lot of time researching. It's a balance between being fair and doing what you can legally, meeting your legal requirements. So then we started looking at all of our expenses. So when you're running a villa, there's a lot of expenses, some of which are paid by us and some of which are paid by the owner. Whether they're paid by us or the owner, we still want to reduce those expenses for us and for the owner. So swimming pool maintenance, we've cut from twice a week to once a week. Pest control, twice a week to once a week. The laundry cost has gone down a lot just because we only clean 3 times a week. So we do changeovers less often. Internet, we're negotiating a 50% reduction in the cost. So we're basically just going through with every supplier and negotiating. And they don't want to lose us as a client. We're quite a big client of all of our suppliers. And we're finding that they're very open to that negotiation. The other thing we've done is gone back to our clients. We have different contracts with different clients. I think when we first started the company, we We hadn't quite got the formula right. And where we've found that we were basically in an unsustainable position with a contract where it was going to cost us a lot of money every month with no guests, we went back to the owner and we just were honest with them. This is the situation. It's not sustainable for us over the period of this thing's going to last. Can you work with us to come up with a contract that's a temporary contract we can use to get through this period? And they were all more than happy to do that. I mean, I was overwhelmed, actually. The goodwill was incredible.
So Zenguest has been able to talk with homeowners and to make them understand. Do you have tips for property managers who may also have to talk with their homeowners, or to talk about having a new type of contract, maybe temporary or completely?
Yeah. I think the first thing is you have to establish a good, very transparent relationship. I think that's very important, that trust is there. So that's why we spend a lot of time communicating with our owners, giving them updates, etc. The other thing is you don't do it too early. The owners have to appreciate the severity of the situation. Otherwise, it just seems frivolous. It just seems like you're trying to grab a bit more profit. So you really have to hold off until it's very, very obvious that you're in a real crisis. So we started these discussions in late March, right? I think if we'd done it any earlier, we could have got some serious resistance. The other thing is it's not just a contract renegotiation. So you have to look at the whole range of services that you're providing for the owner, where they're paying for. So for instance, I told you about the swimming, reducing swimming pool costs and all of the other villa-related costs that we're doing for the owner. So we talk about that stuff first, and then we go on to the contract. So basically, we put it inside the frame of all of the good things that we're doing, and then have the difficult discussion about the contract terms.
That's very smart, because you're also highlighting basically the time you're spending to save them money.
Yeah.
I was also actually impressed you were able even to negotiate internet subscription costs and chemicals for pools. And I think it's very detailed, but it does add up, right? These chemicals for pools are very expensive. And I think most villa in Bali have a pool. That's why it's so important in this business model. So that's
the chemicals for pools. We haven't quite finalized that one yet. The pool maintenance, yes. I mean, we don't actually the pool maintenance, we didn't want to undercut. We didn't want to drive the cost of the supplier down, the person who did the pool maintenance, because they've got to live as well. We just looked at at doing it less frequently.
Yeah, it's a balance as well, because you also want a villa to be still functioning. I think you even for empty villas, you send someone a few times a week to check everything's working, right?
So what we do with the empty villas is, most of the villas we got quickly occupied, but where we have a villa where we can see that it's going to maybe sit empty for a while, like our older, larger villas, they're much harder to fill. 1-bedroom villas, really easy. 2-bedroom villas, a little bit harder. 4-bedroom, older style villa, very difficult. So we offered a kind of a lockdown package for those clients, and that was part of the contract renegotiation. So it's a small monthly fee, and then we just send someone around every day to check the villa. Every few days we'll run all the hot water, check the pumps, just keep the villa in order, because, in Bali, in a tropical climate, the villas are open to the elements. They degrade extremely quickly, as you know.
So lockdown package as well. That's
yes.
Because it's also part of talking with the homeowners, also packaging this in a way they can understand. So we talked about how you adapted your business. We talked about the costs, the services, the homeowners. So I think all we've been through here are very valuable, because it's something homeowners who have vacation rentals themselves, or property managers watching this, could think, okay, I could transfer that. I could do it myself. And so maybe on a final question is like, how did you build all this knowledge? How did you, because you said, okay, let's create a plan for the next 15 months. I think it's relying on your own past experiences, right?
I suppose, actually, I want to make one more point about the lockdown packages, etc. what we're finding is now, like today, I just had a conversation with someone who contacted me from New Zealand asking me what could I do for him in terms of that, because he'd heard about it from someone else. So we're thinking of actually offering this, starting to market it as a lockdown package where we're still looking for long-term clients. And when we find them, we can convert it to a different sort of a contract. And then end up at the end of this crisis with a new customer base potentially.
Yeah, and so if I'm not mistaken, Zenguest is really good at getting bookings from Airbnb, right? So,
That's our best channel, yeah.
and right now you're also actually able to have another kind of demand coming from different ways as well, and you're also actually maybe being able to have new villas joining in right now. It's very
We've also done deals with a couple of villa complexes, one with 20 villas, one with 6 villas, where basically they're quite conservative in the way that they price. They're used to repricing twice a year. They're not very flexible. They're basically not responding to this at all, and consequently they're empty. So I've gone to them directly. I know the complexes, and I've seen their Airbnb profiles, and I can see that they're empty. So I've just gone to them and approached them, and we're now helping them just through Airbnb, trying to get bookings for them. We've got a few bookings so far, and hopefully we can, if not fill them, at least get them to a position where they're covering their expenses. And again, at the end of this, I would be encouraging them to become permanent clients of Zenguest.
That's fantastic. And just going back to my question again, because I think it's also what's been very interesting doing all these interviews with property managers is how we have very different backgrounds. Adele, who's also among the interview, she's a world champion in terms of for paragliding, right? She's a world champion paragliding, and she's property manager as well. So. And she was talking, for example, like she's trained to face fear.
Yeah,
so that's what she does. She says she's not a special person. I think she is, but anyway, she's really trained to face fear. So she used that to say, okay, that's the fear. That's how I'm going to adapt. So what skills or what training experience did you have to come up with this plan and say, okay, that's how we can be adapting?
So I think it's pretty good background. Basically, I spent 20 years working for IBM. And most of the last 7 or 8 years of that was in large outsourced contracts with banks. So we would take over the whole IT department, bring on all the staff into IBM, and I would be the client relationship manager. So I'd be the person that the bank would come to and scream at when anything went wrong. So I had a very strong motivation to keep things very organised, to keep communication. I was very strong on communication because that's critical in a role like that. The customer must not be surprised. You have to keep them from being surprised by anything. You have to always make them feel that they're in the loop and that they are in control of what's going on. That was really useful. But then the last 3 years, I became the business operations manager, first in Singapore, then in Thailand. That meant that every quarter, IBM releases its financial results every quarter. The last month of that quarter is chaos worse than this. It's because basically they give you these targets, mainly around cost reduction, that you simply have to meet. There is no way around them. So you sit together and you spend a week looking through every single cost that you have and working out how to reduce it. That can be retrenchment, but I learned that you cut out a tiny little cost. You do that 100 times and you come up with a huge cost saving. And then, of course, a week before that's due, they raise the target. And so you have to go back and start everything again. So I'm kind of used to that situation, coming up with a plan and then executing against that plan. And I'm really lucky with the team that I have here. Baron steps up to situations like this amazingly. He's really, really good in a crisis. And another person that I'd hired just a couple of months before, he just amazed me. He just shone with when we came into this situation, and mainly with the help of those two, we were able to put this plan into place and execute it.
Well, Andrew Macdonald, thanks so much for sharing all this with people watching. In the notes, in the show notes, I try to summarize most of the action points you have here, and also I really like how we ending this also talking about how the staff is also helping because it's completely part of our companies, right?
Yeah.
So if people want to know more, want to reach out to you, how can they get a hold on you?
Oh, they're welcome to email me or WhatsApp if you include the details anytime, because I can talk about this endlessly.
Okay, so
yeah.
So I put maybe your email address or even WhatsApp. Let's see.
Yeah.
In your contacts below.
Yes.
Once
And
again,
anyone, feel free to contact me. I'd be happy to chat anytime.
perfect. Thanks a lot. Well, thanks for the details. I think the plans and also the energy and the calm. I think that's also very good because it's really helping people think through this and that's what people need right now. I think there was a first wave of panic and now there's like people adapting. So that's what we've been talking about today. It's been very, very helpful and interesting on my side. So thanks for your time, Andrew.
Thank you. It's my pleasure. Thank you, Thibaut.
Talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Yes.